Welcome all. Now, in general, I like to go in order and generally to start from the beginning of any topic, to go to the source, to the root, and then continue from there. And likewise, when learning out of a text, generally, I like to start from the beginning. However, due to the situation, the current situation, now it's about 12 going on 13 days since the war in the Holy Land of Israel, not conflict, not battle. It is a war. And they keep on saying, the Israelis keep on saying that it's going to be a very, very prolonged situation, a long war, till at the end we're going to finally have the victory. Hopefully it will not be as long as they seem to be implying. But at any rate, I want to do a section over here. If you have the book by now, it's page 123, which is not even the beginning of a chapter. It's chapter 5 called Politics, so pretty appropriate. But I want to get straight to this point itself, which is section 3 in chapter 5, the Noahide laws and the land of Israel. So that's page 123. And that's what we're going to be doing hopefully today. And then there's another section, which perhaps next time we'll do that as well. And forgive me for skipping around over here in this book. Now, you have to remember that this book was written in its current form a number of years ago, about 10 years ago. And obviously, it's written before the current situation, which just took place. And therefore, bear that in mind. It would be written a bit more intense. And for those of you that remember, it was approximately, I think, 15 to 18 years ago, where there was a section in the what would be called Gaza, in that area called Gush Katif. And Gush Katif was a beautiful farm area, and it was a many families living there, and they were farming the land, and it was a beautiful, beautiful community. And very sadly, the Israeli government then uprooted these Jewish people from their homes. It was a tragedy, and we understood that it would and could, God forbid, lead to the situation that we have right now and what happened on Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, Saturday, this year. So the fact that we were caught by surprise, yes, but the fact that we are surprised, unfortunately, it's beyond imagination. It's so terrible. But I don't want to elaborate. But you cannot. The Jewish people have no right to give away any land because it does not lead to peace. Now let's see what's the role of the Noahide. How does the Noahide fit into the land of Israel? So page 123, the Noahide laws and the land of Israel. The Jewish possession of the land of Israel. The contemporary geopolitical preoccupation of the world including entire blocks of nations representing the great non-Jewish Abrahamic cultures, the Christian West and the Islamic world, is the land of Israel. Again, this was written about 10 years ago. Obviously, whatever he's saying over here, just multiply that times many. A chorus of national voices or voices within nations with differing stringency dispute the entitlement of the Jewish people to the biblical land of Israel, claiming that it occupies land of other people, and hence they call it the occupied territories. At the same time, whether through military or diplomatic means, attempts are made to achieve an accommodation or coexistence of different peoples within the land of Israel. The world argues about solutions, and all that can be agreed upon is that the solution has not been found. Finally, there is the question of why the dispute over this tiny land should be the flashpoint of world conflict and the issue central to world peace. And if you think about it, it really is strange because it's such a small piece of land. And as we keep on saying, Israel is such a small percentage of the world population. And yet this seems to be the central point of the world peace. Very strange. Each of these questions can be reformulated in ways which relates them directly to the Noahide laws. So being that this class is a Noahide class, and I'm speaking to non-Jews, to the Noahides, so now let's view this all from the perspective of the Noahide laws. So here's the questions. 1, how can the possession of the land of Israel by the Jewish people be explained in terms of Noahide law in response to the claim that the Jewish people have stolen the land? Question number 2, how, according to the Noahide laws, can a solution to the present conflict be found which accommodates different peoples within the land of Israel? And number 3, given that observance of the Noahide laws in international relations is the condition for world peace, why does the conflict over Israel affect peace outside Israel, i.e., in the world at large? We treat these questions in turn. Okay. So now, it's going to be self-explanatory, so let me just read inside before we do any discussing. 2 of the Noahide laws, 2 out of the 7, the prohibitions of theft and killing, clearly apply to international relations. Killing is prohibited except in self-defense, and self-defense is the primary justification for war. Biblically, there was a command by God, who, as the master of life, must authorize offensive war with the possibility of loss of life, because no one else can. So there's a commandment to Joshua, the successor of Moses, to conquer the land by war. All right? This is going back into the original first time that we as a Jewish nation entered into the land of Israel in the year 2488, since creation. Although the land of Israel was given to the Jewish people from biblical times, there is now a question of whether after that period and in the absence of certain conditions, they may conquer it through offensive war without specific divine authorization of the kind that Joshua had, which currently at this certain war right now, that this is irrelevant, because right now it's a war of, how should I say, survival. And, this is not, offensive war going out to try to conquer land or whatever. This is, the territories which Israel presently possesses, however, were not acquired through offensive warfare. The establishment of modern Israel was enacted by the United Nations in 1947, and its expansion since then has come about only as a result of defensive wars. Now, that's a historic fact that nobody can deny. Mainly the Six-Day War. And hopefully, in this current situation, I hope and pray to God that there will be nothing less than the complete takeover of Gaza, not leaving them any, not because you listen and you hear even the so-called, whatever they're called, explaining that, well, there has to be, and this. No, there has to be a complete takeover. And it's not just that there's a terror organization called Hamas, but let's get rid of them. And then, no, there's no such thing as a Palestinian state in the land of Israel. Well, Palestinian state, let them go to Uganda. So all of Gaza has to be completely taken over and 100% under Israel rule. And I'm just talking about Gaza, not talking about Judah and Samaria and about the Golan in the north. So the land, the expansion of the land always, every single time, came as a result of a defensive war. So there's nothing to talk about. The territories within the biblical boundaries of Israel, acquired by Israel from 1948 onwards, were gained through defense war, which does not need divine permission. It's that simple. Because if somebody comes to kill you, get up and kill them first. So whilst there is no question that Israel justly engaged in these wars from the standpoint of the prohibition of killing, is there a question of whether the territories thus acquired were theft? Okay, so we understand that there's no issue of killing. What about the idea of theft? Did the Jewish people steal it? Do we have a right to take it? How does the Noahide prohibition of theft apply to international relations? An act intended to take land of another people, whether through warfare or not, is theft and is prohibited. Yet, where land is conquered in the course war, whether defensive or even offensive, there is a difference between the law of theft by individuals and by nations. Where an individual steals from another, the thief does not acquire ownership of what he or she takes by possession of it alone. Nations, on the other hand, do. Conquest confers ownership on the government of the conquered territory after the event, post factum. Indeed, this is the situation of most, if not all, nations on the face of the earth. They have driven out or conquered other peoples and settled on their land. And we all know the history of the country we're in right now, the United States of America. And in Noahide Law, the conquered land is now under the sovereignty and ownership of the conquering government, even if it was initially stolen. So even if, to begin with, whatever country did not have a right to do it, but once it did it, even though it was perhaps forbidden, now the new government, the country, does own it. But where the lands acquired by Israel through the United Nations partition and the conquest of the subsequent defense wars stolen by Israel in the first place, theft is the taking of property from its owner against the owner's will. That's the definition of theft. When you take someone else's property against their will. As discussed below, which we didn't see, chapter 12, on the Noahide law of theft and material harm, there are three levels of concurrent ownership of property. There's ownership of property by individuals, like a private person. Above and superior to that is the ownership by the state of that same property, which the state can appropriate under certain conditions from its private owner. Above and superior to the ownership by the state of its property is the ownership of God, whose ownership of the same property supervenes on that of state. Okay, so we got private, government, and God. The charge made that the Jewish people stole land within the biblical boundaries of Israel is anticipated and answered by the very first verse of the Bible, Bereshis, the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth. Why, asks the great biblical commentator Rashi, was it necessary for the Bible to begin with these words if the primary purpose of the Bible is to teach laws? Torah is a book of laws, as we discussed in previous classes. So Rashi states that the answer was already given by a great Talmudic sage, Rabbi Yitzchak. And now we quote the first Rashi, mind you, of his entire commentary on the first chapter, first verse, the opening words of the Bible, the first commentary of Rashi. What is the reason God began with the account of Bereshis in the beginning? This is because, and using the language of a verse from the book of Psalms, he relates the power of his deeds to his people in order to give them an inheritance of the land of some other nations. So that if the nations of the world will someday say to Israel, you are listim, bandits, for you conquered the lands of the 7 nations, which inhabited the land of Israel, conquered by Joshua. Israel will be able to reply to them, the entire earth belongs to the Holy One, blessed be He. He created it and gave it to those, meaning the 7 nations which occupied it, who were then fit for it in His eyes. By His will, He gave it to them. But then, by His will, He took it from them and gave it to us. In other words, the land of Israel has not been stolen because its ultimate owner, God, the true Lord of the land, took it from those to whom He had previously granted possession of it, and then gave it to the Jewish people as an internal inheritance. The land has not been stolen by the Jewish people since the ultimate owner, God, asserted His ownership over its previous inhabitants and gave it to the Jewish people. From that point onwards, meaning from Joshua, it is the inalienable possession of the Jewish people. What this means is that the land of Israel is an exception to the rule that conquest confers ownership. No other people could acquire interim possession of it by conquering or dwelling upon it, such that the Jews taking it from them would constitute theft. The unique connection of the land of Israel with the Jewish people is that it is the only land on earth in which the totality of the Jewish commandments, including commandments associated with agriculture and the ritual service of the temple, can be fulfilled. It is a holy land which pertains uniquely to the Jewish people and their divine service. The divine bestowal upon the Jews of an intrinsic relationship to and inalienable ownership over the land has been acknowledged by the leaders of Christian tradition and by Islamic religious leaders on the basis that the Quran, fundamental text of Islam, records that the Jewish people were not only given the land, but ordered to settle it. So no one's arguing with this religious fact. So the land belongs to the Jewish people, and we did get it when we came in with Joshua. The Noahide laws and peace within the land of Israel. Whilst the land of Israel is a Jewish land, the Bible, as elucidated in the tradition of commentary from Sinai, meaning the oral tradition, recognizes the rights of the other peoples to dwell in it. This entitlement, however, is established within the framework of the Noahide laws, right, which many of us are familiar with what we're about to get into now. So yes, do any non-Jews have a right to live in the land of Israel? And the answer is yes, but, and now the conditions are very clearly and directly relevant to the 7 Noahide laws. The Jewish people are biblically commanded not to allow in the land practitioners of idolatry and the barbarous conduct which goes with it. So if there is any barbarous conduct, I think that in the past couple of days, unfortunately, the world has seen some of the most barbaric things which in world history, arguably, we haven't seen. Unimaginable. And I don't know to what degree people know what's really going on. It's too much. Unimaginable. So we're not allowed, the Jewish people are not allowed to allow idolaters and barbaric people to live in the land. But there is also the biblical provision that a non-Jew who undertakes to keep the Noahide laws is assured the right to dwell within it and to special welfare within it. So he has rights, and the Jewish community is to help him, support him, etc. Thus, when historically or in the future, the Jubilee year is observed, which we've spoken about many times, the 50th year, the Jubilee year, an occasion when many practices, including the return of land sold by one Jew to another to its original owner. Right, that's one of the things that happens in the Jubilee year. That time, a non-Jew can become a ger toishav, a resident stranger. That's the way he's translating it. This is achieved by acceptance in a Jewish court to take upon oneself to keep the 7 Noahide laws, permitting one to live in the land of Israel. Not only is this right to dwell in the land thereby conferred, but there then becomes into place an obligation upon the Jewish people to sustain and to provide for the welfare of such a person. To sustain, give him life, to support him, as one would for a fellow Jew. Non-Jews residing in the land of Israel may pursue their own lives and culture traditions within the framework of acceptance of the Noahide laws. At the same time, there is no way that their residency within the land could be allowed to alter the sovereignty or security of the Jewish people within it. So just for example, no Noahide, even if he's a ger toishav, and even if he's really very religiously keeping the 7 Noahide commandments on the highest level, would be allowed to be a member of the parliament or of the Knesset or of the government, the people that make the laws and vote on policies. That's not acceptable. So just one of the many unfortunate situations that we have right now that, right now, the situation is such where everybody realizes the intensity, and for the most part, almost 100%, all politics aside, and there's like a unified government, so to say, and everybody realizes what we have to do right now. God forbid to speak of a ceasefire right now. That would be terrible. Sounds pretty, sounds nice, sounds peaceful. Make love, not war. Yeah. We're not living in the 60s now. We're not hippies. We understand what's going on all too well. So just imagine who are the ones that are to decide details. Amongst them are Arabs. Amongst the members of the Israeli parliament are Arabs. That's absurd. So you say, well, they're not Palestinians, or they're not Hamas, or they're not Hezbollah, or they're not Nazis. It's absurd that Arabs have a say in the government. Unacceptable. I'm saying even if you have good, fine, respectable ger toishav that have a place in the land of Israel, but they cannot be part of the sovereignty or security, the decisions and things like that. If nowadays, because of traditionally specified conditions, the observance of the Jubilee year, do not obtain for acceptance of the ger toishav, what is to be done about the presence of non-Jews and the conditions of their residence in the land of Israel? Very practical. Okay, what do we do now? Let's say we were living a little bit more in a time of peace, Can you allow non-Jews in Israel and to live there? And what exactly would be their rights and their status? The answer to this question is found in the writings of contemporary commentators, that a non-Jew who lives according to the 7 Noahide laws, even without the formal procedure of acceptance of these laws in the Jewish court, as is required for a ger toshav, so therefore he's not called a ger toshav, has nowadays the status of a ger toshav, both with regard to permission to dwell in the land of Israel and to enjoy welfare and active care from the Jewish people. All right, and the footnote for that, 39, brings down the great Ragachover, who that's how he understands in the Rambam in Maimonides, and it's also cited in Likutei Sichos in a talk of the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach, volume 26. So in other words, even though he's technically not called a ger toshav, however, if the person is keeping the 7 Noahide commandments properly, he has a right to live in the land of Israel, and the Jewish people are obligated to sustain and support that person. This is, however, provided that he or she make an explicit commitment to carry out these laws and to do so because they were commanded at Sinai. Their acceptance of the Noahide laws should be a verbal one. Okay, and you can see the references. We've actually seen that essay, that Sikha. Non-Jewish communities and individuals may therefore reside in the land of Israel, but not as subjects of an independent authority, be it the Palestinian Authority or the government of Gaza. They may live as residents under the sovereignty of the Jewish state of Israel, having first committed to abide by the Noahide laws as well as any other consistent positive law enacted by the state. So, for example, if the Arabs in Gaza are not willing to accept the law, let's say, of not to steal anybody or anything, they have no place. Out they go. So, in a sense, a great deal of this is theoretical. But if theoretically the so-called Palestinians or whatever accept the 7 Noahide commandments, then they would have a right to live there under complete Jewish sovereignty. This is not primarily a statement of fealty or loyalty to the state of Israel. Even though the Jewish state has the propriety rights, which all states have vis-a-vis their inhabitants, it is rather a statement of a common loyalty to the laws of God, the Noahide laws, which already evoke deep resonance in the various religious cultures of the region. Talking about religious people. So it's very important. In other words, if there's any concern that there is an individual, let alone a group, that is not ready and willing to live in the land under those conditions, then they have no right to be in the land, even if they claim that they're going to make peace, and we're not to make peace with them. We are to send them out. They are to leave. Let them go elsewhere. Okay? So they are, so at best, a non-Jew in the land of Israel would be a second-class citizen. Israel, the Noahide laws, and the peace of the nations. Another great medieval commentator, Nachmanides, Ramban, learns the first verse of the Bible. Gracious, in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, to be of import for the territorial destinies of all peoples. Nations engage in wars and other plans of their own making, but they are ultimately secured within or displaced from their own or gain other lands under the province and ultimate sovereignty of God. Sovereign nations are not a law unto themselves. They are also persons which can commit crimes both against their own peoples and against other peoples. They can have merits and demerits, and it is these which affect the way they are treated by providence. The moral stature of nations has geopolitical force. The Jewish people, especially that part which is gathered in the Holy Land, contains both religious and secular cultures, between which there have been frictions. Not all the people of Israel live rigorously by all the Jewish commandments, and there is much need in Israeli society for both spiritual refurbishment on the one hand and unification on the other. And actually, just before this war broke out, in the past number of weeks and months, unfortunately, this really came to a very height. The different factions and the different discord, unfortunately. And now it seems like everybody's really united. Nevertheless, the Jewish people as a whole, and especially the majority of Jewry, which now lives in the Holy Land, represents the law and tradition transmitted from Sinai. So even if a person claims I'm not religious, and even if, God forbid, a Jew claims that I'm anti-religious, doesn't change the fact. The Jewish people in the land of Israel, and the only rights we have to the land of Israel, are religious, God-given. This is their ultimate merit and the ultimate guarantee of their security. Israel is treated with hostility or indifference by precisely those elements of the world's cultures which are defiant in conduct of the Noahide laws. Thus, the most fierce opposition to Israel from within the Islamic world is from those individuals or political movements within it which practice an immoral violence between persons, preeminently killing and corrupted justice and rapacity towards their own fellows. And again, what we just witnessed and heard about in the past couple of days, this is an understatement. It does not matter whether these movements pose as religious, just because they call themselves religious, and they may yell all sorts of disgusting, stupid things in Arabic, and they may use God's name in Arabic and doing it, so to say, in the name of religion, name of God. That doesn't change the fact. It actually makes it worse, because that makes them now be transgressors of blasphemy as well, in addition to murderers and stealing, etc. The ferocity of their conduct indicates that they do not submit to God and his laws, but pursue personal and political aggrandizement, transforming into a religious cause. According to an eminent Muslim Sheikh Professor Abdul Palazzi, who embraces the security and integrity of Israel, this is a pathological phenomena from which the Islamic world seeks to free itself. Interesting. In turn, the most intense opposition to Israel, or indifference towards its plight in the secularized West, comes from those elements within it which, through legislation and social policy, have also violated Noahide precepts. So it's not a coincidence. This relates primarily to decadence in the personal sphere, a denigration of religious faith, and a weakening of sexual morality. Against this, there is a strong impulse amongst a number of Christian groups to restore the personal moral compass of Western society, and precisely these groups are those most supportive of Israel. So it's not a coincidence. Why do you have these Christians that are so supportive of Israel? So yes, you can give all sorts of religious explanations and say, well, they have an agenda and they hold it. This is phase one. But then the fact is that they are trying to make this a moral world on all accounts, and it's specifically those people that are the supporters. Not only the merit, but also the success of nations, which according to Nachmanides go hand in hand, are connected with their treatment of the Jewish people, the primary transmitters of the tradition from Sinai, and specifically the laws of the Noahide laws. In other words, the world needs to understand and to know that their God-given laws come through the Jewish people. So take care of the Jews, and you're going to have what you need. This is why the ultimate vision of redemption for humanity is associated with the end of the subjugation and endangerment of the Jewish people. Thus, Maimonides writes of the time of the redemption. And this is the last chapter of the whole Maimonides, the laws of kings and the laws of Melech HaMashiach. In those days, Israel will dwell securely alongside the nations, which previously harbored evil. And all the nations will return to the true universal teaching, and they will no longer rob nor kill, but they shall consume that which is permitted peacefully alongside the Jewish people. In those days, the protection and security of Israel will signify the acceptance of divine authority of the Noahide laws by the nations. Accordingly, they will no longer rob nor kill one another. Not just that they won't harm the Jews. No nation will harm another nation. No people will harm other people. There will be the peaceful coexistence of all peoples throughout the world under one sovereign, God, in accordance with his laws, the Noahide laws. All right, at this point, we're going to open for people's questions, comments, or anything that you have to say. Any questions? Any clarifications? No? Anybody? Are our regulars all in?
No questions, Rabbi.
There we go. Go ahead.
No, I said no question.
Oh, no questions. Okay, fine. That must be we're pretty clear over here, or what he's saying actually.
Well, this is James Bakunis. I'd actually I thought of something, if you don't mind me asking.
Go ahead.
If you're pointing like due north, from the on the globe, there's the Ukraine, and the Jewish history with the Ukraine. Do you see much that this is kind of is this? I've heard talk about this could lead to a world war, or I mean, if you look on the map and everything like that, it's like from Finland all the way down, all the way down to like Yemen. And why is that axis there like that? But I'm just wondering how much. I mean, I've heard of the am I saying it right? Holodomor, from the famine in Ukraine that Stalin caused, and I'm wondering how much of the trouble there is like bleeding south. Does that make sense? But
Well,
I thank you for the opportunity, Rabbi and gentlemen. Thank you. That's it. I'll just mute myself, and wait your response.
Okay,
Thank you.
There is much speculation by many as to the situation right now. And as I say, speculation. Some people may feel that they're in the know, and they may speak very passionately or sound like they're very sure and certain. But I'm not so sure that they've got it. There are a number of factors here. Not necessarily in this order, but I want to just throw out several points. Point one, we have a rule that a prophecy for something negative, something bad, need not materialize, need not happen. In other words, if there's a prophecy, God spoke to a prophet and told him something positive, something good, as a rule, with almost no exception, that has to be fulfilled. And it cannot be changed if it's a positive prophecy. Which is not the case, though, even though there's maybe a prophecy, and God clearly stated some negative thing, that can be changed. For example, if the country or the people or the person, the individual, whatever the case may be, did teshuvah, they repented before the casualty happened, before the punishment came, then God could say, oh, there's a different situation, and I will not do, even though God knew that that person would do that as well. Doesn't matter. The philosophical part we're not going to get into right now. So a negative prophecy that need not be fulfilled. That's number one. Point number two. As we mentioned in the past, last class, it's extremely important to exercise what we call in Hebrew, bitachon. It could be a whole class for itself, and perhaps one of these classes we should devote to that. But there are certain concepts, certain words in the Talmudic literature, which each one of them is a whole world for itself. For example, there is the word emunah. Emunah would be translated into English as something like faith or belief. Believe in God. Emunah. Then there's another word which seems to be a similar concept, but it's really different. And that is bitachon, which means assurance, to be certain. So in these times, always, but especially when the challenge is, it's extremely important for people to have emunah, which means not to forget that God runs the world and everything that happens, God runs it. He's in charge. But bitachon, to be certain that only good is going to happen in the most revealed way, regardless of what happened up to this point, but from this point on, only good will happen. And that's at times extremely difficult. That's bitachon. Another point. We are very fortunate. And I say we, I mean everybody who's part of this generation. Surely the Jewish people, but even the Noahides, who, whether you know about it or not, and if you don't know about it, well, we're telling you now. And that is that our generation is different from any other generation since the creation of the world. In what way? That we are definitely the generation of the final and ultimate messianic redemption. The prophet of our generation, which again is a class unto itself, how do we know he's a prophet? How do we know he's the prophet? Which is the Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach, and that's another class unto itself, how do we know that he's Mashiach? So the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach, said as a prophecy, and I don't use that word with poetic license, I mean it quite literally and legally, a Jewish law, stated as a prophecy that we are the last generation of exile and the first generation of redemption. And he repeated it many times. So, that being said, the current situation is not the same had it occurred in a previous generation. And taking it one final step, not only are we, this generation, the final generation of exile and the first generation of redemption, but we're on the brink, we're on the threshold of the redemption, at least as of 57, 52 since creation, which is roughly 1991. So since 1991, at least since then, we are now on the threshold of redemption, and there's no turning back. Now, having said all that, personally, I'm just speaking on my own. What I told you now are all factual things. Now I'm giving you my 2 cents. Are there things which don't make sense to me? Yes. Are there things that don't seem to fit into the puzzle and into the picture? Yes. However, does that in any way shake or weaken my faith and my belief and my knowledge of where we're at and what I do know? Not in the least bit. I have questions. It could be a lot of things. In anything, take something totally non-related, complete secular thing, and you know that in whatever it might be, in a science and anything, that A plus B equals C. But then you have a contradiction to that, but you know that every time A plus B equals C. Okay, so you have a question. So this is similar to that. In other words, at the point we're at now, there aren't supposed to be wars. There's not supposed to be bloodshed. Even if it doesn't involve the Jewish people and the land of Israel, that's not where we're at. So the whole war between Ukraine and Russia seemingly, from my very limited understanding, not supposed to be happening. But the fact that it is happening. Okay, so then I don't know something. Let alone this war in the land of Israel, I can explain it, but I choose not to. I don't want to share with you those specific thoughts. But speaking in the broader scope of things, it's not supposed to be happening. It's not. This is not how you enter into the Messianic era. And all of the prophecies that do speak about terrible, terrible things, well, how about World War II, the Holocaust? Wasn't that bad enough? So here we are, fast forward, whatever, some 70 years later, why have more of that? And we did learn the Sikha, the talk, the essay about the 1/3 of the world and all that. And we saw how the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach even explained that that's not to be understood as people needing to die. And then, of course, there is the concept of the war of Goig u'Magog, which I presume a lot of people are going to be talking about that now. Goig u'Magog, which is a catastrophic world war centered around Jerusalem, which is going to have, God forbid, terrible, terrible destruction. And that's going to usher in and lead in to the ultimate redemption. However, as I said, a negative prophecy need not come true. So even though it's written right there in the prophets, they speak about Gog u'Magog, doesn't have to materialize. That's number one. Number two, arguably, some people say that it already happened years back. So we need to pray and to demand of God that all evil should come to an immediate, miraculous end. And it shouldn't have to be prolonged and bloodshed. So those are just a few thoughts, a few points that I wanted to share with you. So as far as what we can do now,
I certainly do.
huh?
I certainly do appreciate it, sir. I respect your touch and trying to trying to not make it so like I'm like I should be scared to death. You know, 'cause like sometimes Christians, you know, my past faith tradition would like, oh my gosh, my hair should be on fire right now. But uh, but no, I appreciate your measured response and your measured hand, and you know, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody, my colleagues sitting here in the lesson as well, for indulging me in this moment. And, well, I thank you, honestly.
Somebody has his hand up.
Who's that?
That's me. Yeah, I don't know. I forgot how to add my name up there. This is David Bond.
Who's this?
David Bond. I've been in here before. It's just been a little while because it was off for the holidays and everything. I was going to say, in a way, isn't this kind of this work to kind of be expected from the prophet? Because doesn't Israel have to be basically, as long as the Palestinians are there, isn't it basically preventing Israel from being fully back? So just them, if Egypt just took them in and they left, wouldn't that satisfy that criteria? Because it really, for the Mashiach coming, this is kind of predictable, isn't it? That something like this would happen. That there has to be some end to it. Jerusalem can't be split forever. So some kind of catalyst had to kick it off.
But what I would say to that is, had we merited, it could have been in a peaceful way. The Israeli government could have said, there's no such thing as this nonsense of two-state solution. There's no such thing as dividing up Jerusalem into this quarter, that quarter, none of that stuff. And they could have done it in a very, not aggressive way, in a very proper, proud, religious Jewish way. And again, some of you may remember this, some of you may not be old enough. The 6 Day War in Washington, they did not believe, they thought that this was some kind of a trick of some sort that Israel had up its sleeve. Because right after the war, when Israel was asking to come to the table and make concessions, and they want to make nice and give back some of the territories that they suddenly got and won through this war, Washington, I mean, they thought this is some ingenious trick they have over here. Like, what's behind it? It didn't make any sense to them, because it doesn't make any sense. And no normal country would ever do such a thing unless you have some complex, unless you feel that you don't have any rights, whatever it may be. So it's very unfortunate. So to say that this was expected and this is necessary, I don't want to go there, because it doesn't have to be in such a way. And Jerusalem can be the complete Jerusalem, and they have no rights. It's the most ridiculous thing that there's still the mosque on the Temple Mount. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, the only reason why we have the Western Wall is because of the 6 Day War. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in Jewish hands either. So to give them rights, besides the fact that they, from time to time, get violent and throw stones from there, et cetera, et cetera. So from a security perspective, but it doesn't make any sense. The entire Temple Mount, along with all of Jerusalem, along with the entire land of Israel, along with the parts that are not part of the Holy Land, they're beyond the borders of the biblically promised land. All of those need to be and must be in the hands of the Jewish people for security reasons. So there's actually 2 points here. One is the religious. One is the religious holy point, and that is the promised land, like we discussed. And number 2, it doesn't matter where. You could be in Chicago, you could be in New Jersey, you can be in Africa, or Asia, Antarctica, doesn't matter. Wherever you are, you need to be safe and secure. So that has nothing to do with the Holy Land. And that's why, for example, the whole Sinai, the whole southern part that was given away, which is ridiculous. You need that for your security, so don't give it away. So we're not looking at it, well, where's the biblical border? And let's take out the Bible and the maps and let's figure out what we can give them. We're way past that. So if it means that in the north, they should have gone all the way into Beirut in the summer of 1982 and conquered it, and they could have, and they stopped short. And in a sense, it's so painful to say, but the soldiers that died in battle, in combat, because of the decisions made by the politicians, is in vain. They died for nothing, which is so painful. And it doesn't need to be that way. So all the way to the north and all the way down, and Gaza, which is right on the western, the language has to be changed. It's not occupied territory, and like what's left? What do they want? It doesn't work like that. And hopefully we have to pray to God that this time, even though we failed each time, that this time will be different, and that this time we'll do what we have to do and completely conquer it. And I understand there's a lot of complications. But yeah, it's a very, I don't think that we ever had a war on this scale. One thing is for sure, we're actually now living through history. This is definitely history. We talk about the War of Independence, we talk about the War of 56, we talk about the 6-Day War, the Yom Kippur War. We are now living in history. And also the travesty of in one day that attack. There's like a lot of questions on many levels. Forget about that. And everyone says, hold off with all the questions till after the victory and after we finish this war. But the amount.
One other thing.
Yeah.
Oh, one other thing is that one of the things that troubled me right off the bat, as I'm kind of familiar with the security wall between Gaza, is how that they were able to get through like that, even on a holiday. The automatic detection system should have alerted them, and one helicopter gunship could have cleared those guys out of the air.
Doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. There's a very long list of questions. There are some very, very big major questions, and then there are hundreds of little questions. There is a long list of very, very obvious major questions. It doesn't make sense on many levels. It just doesn't make sense, the whole situation. Very, very sad, very, very tragic. And even to say that there's a silver lining and that it's from this is going to come, at the end of the day, so many innocent lives were lost. To justify it, it's too difficult to justify it.
Yeah. It is. There's something funny there.
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. Just another point, which I'm sure that is obvious, but Many have brought this out. Many of the news commentators or what have you. Compare this to the United States or to New York of 9/11. So at that time, rightfully so, the United States said, we're going to go after the person responsible for this, and we're going to get them, and nothing's going to stop us, and it ain't over till we get them, and they get what they deserve, and that's it. And there was no thing to saying, well, there's civilians, there's innocent people there, and how could you do that? And you don't know, and you have to be careful. No. But what they did, 9/11, the Twin Towers, this number-wise, it was worse. Just take the numbers of the population of, again, saying that 9/11 was an attack on the United States of America. Let's put it that way. So the number of victims, of casualties, percentage-wise, compared to if this was if what happened this time in Israel was an attack on Israel, so it was a higher number. And just like then, nobody was bothered and nobody questioned the president of the United States and the government for what they did. And same thing now. So it's like there's so much media and political pollution, and people have been for so many years conditioned in such twisted ways that it's so painful, but there's no question to be asked, and this is beside the fact that everybody knows that over all these years, right under the nose of the Israeli government, under their security, and with the Israeli indirect support, the tunnels, and we cannot imagine what they have underground. So people see the beautiful pictures of Gaza being destroyed and blown up. That's what we see above ground. What's going on underneath, nobody knows. Nobody has any idea. It's we need a big miracle. And the good news is that in the middle of all this, nothing has to come to its conclusion. Mashiach, boom, can come in a second and say, oh no, it's too early, it didn't finish. No. He's way overdue. And therefore, we want Mashiach now. Now, as in this second. That has to be part of our expectation and our demand.
That's very interesting, Rabbi, because I'm not sure if I remember this. This is James McInnes again. But I seem to remember when 9/11 happened, the United States tried to call it Operation Righteous Fury, I think. And there was a big political blowback. And so I want to think that they ended up changing it, for political sensitivities. But I thought it was, that's just what's coming to mind, Righteous Fury. And I think they ended up changing that. Do you recall anything like that?
What I just, now we're mentioning that we're speaking about 9/11, I do remember then someone put out sort of like, I don't know, like a bumper sticker or one of these ads or something. How do you put it? US 9/11, Israel 24/7. People have to realize, people felt America is so secure and there's no worries and there's, like, what in the world, we, can't be under attack. So people have to realize that, it's not simple. It's not, and together with all this, there's so many miracles happening. So many, you hear the stories. I mean, 9/11, there were also many miracles, and many of the survivors, there literally have been books written, even like children's books of the stories of individuals. Here too, there are countless miracles.
9/11 was a little suspect too, if you ask me. They should have never allowed an airplane. I don't understand how an airplane ever got within the airspace of the Pentagon like that. The whole Pentagon story, well, they definitely justified their war that they were already basically planning on in the Middle East. They'd been planning on it for some time. And then, they just happened to get through. You're telling me that nobody shot down that plane in 1940? They couldn't have flown an airplane into the Pentagon. You're telling me now in whatever year it was, 2001, that they wouldn't take down that plane, that they didn't have fighter escorts on them on time, that the passports were recovered intact even though they were paper, that the buildings were designed to withstand hits from airplanes. Building 7 went down for no reason. It was very sus, to put it mildly.
A very, very good point. And the conspiracy theories seemingly have no end, because there's so many questions and so many obvious questions that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to have these very simple questions, and there are either no answers or very, very insufficient, very shallow answers which don't really answer it. So many questions, and therefore there's a lot of crazy theories. But in addition to all that, and this is a very major point, at the end of the day, it's in God's hands. So therefore, even though you may think, we got all the security, if God wants something to happen, it happens, and then we have no idea how did that happen. So you always have to remember that as well. That doesn't mean we're not supposed to do what we're supposed to do. And that doesn't mean that we don't have a right to demand answers to the questions and to learn from history, etc., etc. I understand that. But there's a concept, it's a verse in the Bible, in the Torah, that says that when you are successful, speaking to the Jewish people, when you go into the land of Israel, and you will be successful, do not dare say, and I'm going to quote the verse in the Hebrew, Koichi ve'oitzem yodi asa li esachayil hazeh. Translated, my strength, the might of my hand, did for me this success. Don't you dare say that. You have to do what you got to do, and you have to train your soldiers to the best. But don't you forget for one moment that it's the God of Israel who is giving you your success. So we have to always remember that.
Thank you. Powerful discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Well, we should all try to be as positive as you can, and it's very important to see to it that people that we can affect, people around us, people that we, in one way or another, interact with, whether it's the social media or whatever, to try to give everybody encouragement. And fear is not good, and because on many levels this war is going on, and here us sitting quote unquote secure in the United States, we have to realize that it's a war going on, and it's not just a war between some terrorist organization against Israel. It is definitely, I don't want to use the word or the phrase world war, but it's definitely world, international, and we have to have a lot of positivity, not to have anxiety, not to have fear, and to have, as I mentioned before, bitachon, assurance in God. All the best, everybody. We should hear only good news in the most revealed way.
Okay, we're gonna have this next week.
Why not?
All right,
Yes.
thanks.
We're looking at next week, same time, same place. Hopefully, in good health with good news.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You will have